Welcome to Krome Cast. Check it out. I'm Sam Major, Commercial Director for Krome Technologies. I'm joined by a lead SharePoint consultant, Mr. Mark Bowerman.
Morning.
Mark, so this kind of leads on a little bit from one we did previously, I did with Doug, around Viva. We talked a bit there about SharePoint and how people starting to use Viva instead of SharePoint. But the reason you're here is SharePoint's still very much a real thing with lots of development, and we're going to go through some of that today. So in keeping with the general order of things, can you talk through the three things you're not going to cover today?
I can indeed. So we're going to start to look at planning for success, how you build it up, using SharePoint as a communications hub and the design that goes around it, and then looking at improving the employee experience within SharePoint.
So last one, very important. Looking forward to getting to that. But if we go to the top of your list, and as we've often talked about here, planning is everything.
Planning is key.
I've recently had a conversation with someone around that their SharePoint implementation is terrible, it's awful, it doesn't work. And actually, when you get to the crux of it, you go right back to the root cause, it's all of the planning.
It is. A lot of people get on board with SharePoint. They think they're going to use an internal tool. And I've heard it described as like the Wild West. People just get a SharePoint and then they get people to start adding pages, start building subsites, start building hubs, and creating all the different things around that. But there's no planning. And in the end, it's just this mess that people can't understand, they can't look at. And then people say, oh, SharePoint's a terrible experience.
Yep.
Really don't like it because what a mess it is. It's just chaos on there. And that goes down to no forward planning. They start as a new business, they start to work through it, and then they start to just throw stuff at it, and it just becomes challenging to work with.
Yeah. So I guess in your experience then, how do we best avoid that? Is that tightening up the committee, the work on it, reducing that people can have input at what time? Is it giving it to an expert and letting them hold you by the hand and leading there? How do people avoid that pitfall?
So it's a bit of both, really. So you need to get a team who take ownership of the site. You need to have, typically you'd get an IT team who take ownership of how it's built, what the structure is, but also you need a comms team involved to understand what the site is going to do. Is it going to be a communication site or is it going to be a document repository? Mm-hmm. And it can be both, but typically if you want it as an intranet and you want it to engage with your team and build that experience, you need to be a comms site. So you need people on board. You need people who are owners, and you need people who are brand experience adopters, and those that really want to engage with the whole process. So once you've built that, you then need to also engage with somebody who's going to work out how to structure it. And that goes right back to the beginning. You need to sit down and you say, okay, what are we going to do? What sort of hub sites are we going to have? What's going to be on each page? Who's going to take ownership of those pages? What content are you going to put on those pages? And like all sites, content is king. So it is imperative that your site has a lot of good content, that there's reasons to return. People are coming on board to look at it for different reasons. It's also good to think of it as the core place where you're going to get all your information. It's your single source of truth. That's where you go to get all your main documentation that's shared company-wide. Mm-hmm. And that's really where SharePoint is good. So then if you've got somebody on there who can sit and look at it and start to take it down from, you look at your buckets and you say, okay, what do we need on this page? What do we need on this page? Which site areas are going to be relevant for each team? And then you build it out from there. And you take the structure, and then you'll start to build out a site map to say, this is what we'll look at. We'll start to say, this content will sit under there, this content will sit under here. And you work collaboratively with the team to ensure that you've got all the right information. And then once you've got that, you can then flesh it out and start to get wireframes, and then start to do the interesting bit, which is where you bring in the colour and the visuals, and you bring in the brand.
Yes. That's interesting, because I've often referred to the colouring in end of SharePoint, right? But that's the powerful part, right? Because it takes it from being a very flat, unengaging thing to something that actually, like you say, it gives people that reason to return, becomes a useful resource.
Yeah, you want to draw people in. So, there are examples where you start it on your own. Most people's day job doesn't involve being a SharePoint designer.
Yeah.
So they'll open it up. They'll just use the standard format. They'll just add links and expect people to want to come back and look at it. But actually, once you start to bring in the color, you start to bring in the whole brand, you start to bring in images, and images are always a big draw. Then it engages people with your page, and that's what you want. You want people to come in, look at the information, and then move on to the next part of it and get what they need for the business.
That bit, the site mapping piece of getting what they need, but also easily, because like you say, some of them are the Wild Wild West and bits end up everywhere and it's disjointed, and I think you use the word chaos. I've seen a few, but it's making it engaging, and actually so I can find what I need quickly. I think that's a huge part of it, is that mapping process and getting that right.
Yeah, it's no different to your external website. You want to be able to get people to their core information within 3 or 4 clicks.
Yeah.
It doesn't change whether you're talking to your customers on the outside or you're talking to your employees on the inside. You've got to get that information quickly. I looked at one the other day and I was down to folder level 12, I think, before I got to the document I needed.
Yeah. And
that's just poor planning. That's just people keep adding stuff and saying, oh, I need a folder for this. So I want to put that in a folder and I'll put that in a folder. And it's difficult to break that mentality of, oh yeah, I think I need a folder. That would be more obvious. SharePoint has such a good search tool that actually you don't necessarily need folders. You could put it in just one very big library and use the search. But actually people don't get out of that mentality of having a folder. So that's why you find you have lots and lots of folder structures. But it's trying to pull that up so that you're at a good level of engagement so that people know what that top level is, what they'll find underneath it, and then they get the document.
Perfect. That's probably a good time for us to go some the pre-canned demo and talk through some of the process of how we get people into good shape. Cool.
Okay, let's jump straight in and talk about SharePoint Modern. We're going to look at how to get the best out of it, how to engage your audience, and how to support your brand. But we'll also look at what some of the pitfalls might be. However, before we start, I want to state that what we're looking at is visuals and dummy screens. They are from real projects, but the names and the details have been adjusted as these are private business intranets. The first thing we'll look at is why site structure is critical to your new SharePoint Modern site. A well-planned SharePoint site isn't just for today. It needs to support your business needs going forward. What you don't want is your audience lost in a labyrinth, clicking through the site, unable to find what they're looking for. That's the results of a very poor structure. Right up front, you need a clear vision of the site's purpose and what the user journey will be like. You need to ask yourself, are you creating a communication site or a document repository? Will there be hub sites or a simple page structure? How will you signpost the information and help your team navigate around the site? The example here on the screen, we have quick links, events, news, people directory. It has a clear footer and there are dividers with color and image sections. How do you formulate your site structure? Well, we use design and development process tool that has 6 key stages. We've been using this tool for a long time and it's proved to be a very successful process. Stage 1 is the analysis stage. We look to understand the business structure, its needs, its goals, short and long term. We look to define the audience and their needs and start to consider their user journey. Stage 2 is all about architecture. Here we look at the content, how it should be grouped. We develop a sitemap and we look at how this will help define the functionality and the navigation required for the site. So a basic structure like this for the sitemap, your homepage, and then you develop out the trees and the groups and you start to build out all the individual areas. And depending on how complex the site is as to how detailed all of these different sitemaps become. There's also a wireframe stage, which is the basic structure of your site, which then is an iterative process that we then begin to build out and go through several stages to get to a point where everybody's happy with what is the core structure and core development process of the site. We also need to ensure that scheduling works properly and you engage all of the stakeholders. So we identify project leads, we ensure who's available at what time, and everybody knows where they are and when they need to be reviewing the site, what the content is, what the expectations are for delivery at each stage. Stage 3, visual design. Why we're here. Designers can solve problems more quickly, we can get better results, and generally in the long term, we're less expensive and deliver a much better product. So what are we doing at this stage? We're creating the engaging and user-friendly UI and UX for the site. We're populating the wireframes that we had. We're bringing them to life with color, with imagery, with functionality. What do the rollovers look like? Where do the pages lead to? What does the navigation actually look like? And all the things that make your site a really engaging and interesting place for the user. Stage 4. This is where the development team come in. Working with the designers, they build out the site. then building the structure, creating the front-end functionality, and they'll populate the site with all of your content. Stage 5, QAT, UAT, and delivery. So quality assurance testing, that's us looking at the site, checking that it does all the things that we believe it should do before it goes to you, the client. User acceptance testing, that's where you come into it. You go through the whole site, you test with the key stakeholders, you find all the bugs, you find all the things that may or may not be working correctly, update the content, change some of the imagery, and it all gets refined before launch. And then obviously there's launch day, and then we have a wash up afterwards to ensure you're happy with everything that was created. And finally, stage 6, the support team are always available to ensure that your site is always available, always up, always live. You can have all sorts of different levels of service contract that support your site. It really depends on the business requirements. Common pitfalls and how we can avoid them. We'll begin by looking at a couple of examples where the sites were built by the client's own IT and comms teams using out-of-the-box features. They chose not to engage with SharePoint specialists who could have helped them develop their site into the busy, engaging communication hub that was envisaged at the beginning of the project. Instead, the in-house teams worked with basic functionalities of SharePoint and the sites were developed organically. Because of the way they were built, the navigation is not as user-friendly as it could be, the look and feel is not attention-grabbing, and overall, the user engagement was low for both sites. In this first example, it's clean and fairly well structured. We have clear left-hand menus. We have highlighted information front and center. And the core area delivers key information that users might need. What is not is it's not engaging. There is nothing to draw in the attention of the audience. There are no information signposts. These are elements that will tell your audience what they will find in each area. And there's no page structure that provides the tiered level of information users are used to on most websites. The supporting pages continue in the same vein. Clean, clear, but not very inviting, and no real indication of what the information can be found on each of the pages. In our second example, we do have some images which help with the appeal of the page. However, we have 3 sets of menus, each directing the user to the same information. The logo is set into the banner, but it's dropped into a white block and not in keeping with the company branding. The content section is functional if a little dull, but again, we have the navigation on the left, but repeated in the tiles in the center of the page. Here and here. The following page is different again. This looks completely different to our previous page. Different structure, different color, different navigation. To the user, it looks like it may have arrived at a different site. At least our first example had a consistent look and feel. So let's now take a look at what SharePoint Modern can look like when designed well. But first, let's have a little talk about branding. You wouldn't launch an unbranded, poorly designed website, so why accept one for internal communications? Your colleagues are just as important, if not more important to the business, as your customers are. Brand recognition should start internally. A properly branded SharePoint intranet site will help connect your colleagues with your brand and your company values. Implemented correctly, it can drive engagement and improve business outcomes. So here's our newly designed and branded SharePoint site. The design brings the page to life and has been structured in such a way as to ensure key areas of the real estate are utilized for core messages. This site serves 2 purposes. It's both a communication site and a document repository. So our site welcomes the user with a bespoke message and asks them what they're looking for when they arrive at the site. The search tool allows them to quickly find information and documents that they may be here to find. This central area will drive the users to the core hub sites within the site. So these are specific areas for each part of the business. Here we're looking at the clinical hub, we have the volunteer hub, health hub, learning hub, etc. And as the user rolls over, it shows where the user is going. To the right here we have the latest documents, and these are surfaced to make it easier for users to find all the latest information that they should be reading. Our news section is utilised to share company information. This saves the comms teams needing to send out emails once a quarter. News stories can be added as they come up. Regular news updates help to drive engagement, and it provides users with a reason to return. Further down the page we have Spotlight on Us. These are news stories about colleagues, and they are more personal than the company news information. Everyone in a business is always interested in what their colleagues are doing, and again this helps to drive engagement. So this one we've added as a carousel and moves easily through the different stories. Forms and templates. Forms and templates provide quick access to key documents that are commonly used throughout the business. We then have upcoming events, a section that informs colleagues of the many different things happening around the business. Finally, quick links can be used to drive the use of specific core information. All of this was built using out-of-the-box web parts and is easily managed by the site editors. If we take a further look around the site, we have a mega menu here that will drive the user through all the different pages on the site. Areas highlight the information where they're moving to. Short overview of what can be found in this area. Similarly with useful information, we have another menu structure that will drive them around to different parts of the business. If we click through here, this will take us to the news section. So this is where all of our news is added as a full list. We have paging at the bottom here that will enable users to quickly flick through the different stories that looked very different. We now have a common look throughout the site. When users go to their different pages, they come to this well-structured, simply designed page that feels like a brand, feels like the site, feels like it's owned by the business. We even have a document repository, which is a simple library structure, but it's clean and clear and allows the user to find the information they need really quickly. If we quickly go back to here, we go to our health and wellbeing page, and then we look at another site, and you can see that there's a family style following out throughout the entire site. Users will know where they are, they know what they're looking for, and they will feel part of the brand. If we quickly go back to what we had before, we have this, and we then went through to a very simple text page. We're now in a much more structured and engaging format. And this all helps to make the user feel like they're part of the business and they understand the brand. And that brand will translate through to everything they do going forward.
Brilliant. That's very interesting. It's really good to see the points there around what it looks like if we just go out the box versus actually doing it properly and making it kind of visual and impactful, and actually getting the important bit we've talked about is that engagement and that experience. I think it really shows in what we've seen there.
Yeah. As I say in the video, you wouldn't allow your external facing website to go out unbranded. Yeah. Everything is about your brand. That's how key it is to your customers. So why is that not key to your team?
Yeah, absolutely. We put a lot of time and energy into brand, how we outwardly face, how we want people to see us and understand our brand. You have to internalize that. You do, and that then leads on to them, your employees, actually promoting your business and feeling part of the team. So it's really key that they get all those messages up front. So engaging with a site that shows you what you mean to the business, you're important to the business because you've invested in this SharePoint site, is all part of the experience that you'll get from your business. Well, it carries so much value around the messaging. We're huge on culture. We're not alone. I mean, culture is a big thing for any business now. Make sure your people are valued and understand their worth, that you value them, etc. It's carrying that messaging through from top to bottom, front to back. And I think what we've seen there and the work I've seen you do can really, hammer home that point. Yeah, and interesting part of one of the things that people find most interesting on intranet sites, and this is what gives you the unique difference between an external and internal, is people are actually really interested in other people within the business. Yeah. So sometimes they get down as to the level of, Mary got married this month, or
Craig
New
had a baby.
starters. New starters.
But new starters is always good. People moving, changing positions, changing roles, all of that can be pushed through, and people can see what's going on. And then trying to find ways to engage as well, so you can add into the news stories how many people have viewed it and whether they like it, and then that builds into the comms team doing their job correctly, so that they actually write stories that people are going to read and get engaged with.
No, I think it's that engagement piece. I think that's key. You know, experienced engagement, two key words for me there, and getting that right. I just think it's hugely powerful. Right? So I've seen the value of what you do for us internally and externally with our clients. That culture thing is I think very important. Carrying that message, like say internal comms teams doing what they need to do with that, and actually measuring the value of what they're putting out there and tuning it to get it right.
Yeah, and SharePoint is such a powerful tool. You can get all the stats around who's looked at what pages, how long they've been on there and things. So then your comms team should be using that to understand the sorts of stories, and then they should be engaging with other parts of the business to say, this is what you need to be doing to get people to come to your site. This is the sort of information you should be putting up there so that people will come and understand. And you've got to look at it and say, look, if I'm a new employee, I'm a new starter, how do I find out information about HR? How do I find out about the finance team? What else does the business do? How do I can find my way around it to see all the other areas I can talk to my customers around and bring the business to life for me when I'm talking to the external client?
Well, it's you do hear horror stories of people starting a new business and they've been there weeks and they still don't know who's who in the zoo, where to do, what to do, where to do it, etc. And actually giving them a really good resource.
Yep.
Here's where it is. Here's how you do. Here's who you speak to. Here's who these people are. All this sort of stuff. I think you get more out of your employees by empowering them and having a good intranet. It just kickstart their time within your business massively.
Yeah, the more information you can give people, the more they're able to feel comfortable in and around the business, talking to other people about the business. So, one of the things we always say put on each page is put a contact on there so you know who to contact. So if you go to finance and you think, oh, well, who's going to help me if I've got a question, then you've got a level of information on there. And, SharePoint being linked to your Active Directory, you can find the people really quickly, and it brings up all their information, all their data, so that you know their email address, their phone number, and all the things, and the role, and where they are in the business. So it's really simple to use, and it's such a great tool. It's a very powerful tool that people forget how good it is.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that kind of go back to where we started this conversation. That's all in the planning and preparation.
Yeah, plan it up front, understand what you're trying to deliver, and ensure that you then bring that all the way through. And then you take it all the way through to ensuring that, just before you release the site, you've got to go through user acceptance testing, which is always key. And that goes back to your core team. They're the only ones that really know what that is. So that goes back to the IT team and the comms team around, the ownership of the site and saying, we think this is all right. We've approved it. It's all good. And all the information is correct. And that's where you go through the whole process. So we have, there is a process to go through of 6 stages. Yeah. And then, of course, at the end of it, we're still here to support you, which is key. You don't just hand it over and say we're done.
Yeah,
it goes on and on, looking after it. So you need new pages designed. You might have problems with the SharePoint itself that needs fixing. The team can look after you all the way through.
Perfect. It's been really interesting. Thanks for joining me.
Pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of Krome Cast. Check it out. If there's anything you'd like us to cover or any more information you'd like from Mark, then leave that in the comment section below. Remember to like, subscribe and share. And join us next time on Krome Cast. Check it out.